Well, Secretary Kerry called to congratulate Benjamin Netanyahu today on a big win. We haven't heard when or if the president is going to call the Israeli prime minister, but it was a big win. The Israel Project, a nonprofit analyzing the election, wrote it this way: the pre-election polls were wrong, but maybe understandably so. They predicted the seats for the left-wing parties fairly well. What they missed was a late surge by the Likud, which drew votes away from parties to its right. Many voters who preferred Netanyahu to be prime minister, but who had been planning a vote for a potential coalition partner rather than for Likud directly, ended up voting for him. Exactly why those voters wanted Netanyahu hasn't been answered by data yet. It could be that security played a greater role in the election than had been anticipated. The region is disintegrating. Iran is on the verge of being legitimized as a nuclear threshold state, and voters might have reached for stability. One analysis. Let's bring in some others. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard. A.B. Stoddard, associate editor of The Hill, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Charles.
Well, it was a big victory for Netanyahu personally, and I think the reaction of the administration is now reaching levels where it's become unseemly. The pettiness and the petulance with they are discussing the election. The presidential spokesman congratulates Israel on holding an election rather than, as did the Prime Minister of Canada, of the UK, congratulating the winner. Look, it's clear that Obama loathes Netanyahu more than any other world leader, meaning more than the Ayatollah in Iran or Putin in Russia, and he did everything he could to unseat him, but he failed. And I think the message here is this was an election between Bibi and Obama. That was on the ballot. Because Obama was essentially saying, if you want to reconcile with the United States, you want your ally behind you, you got to get rid of Bibi. That worked in ousting Prime Minister Shamir in the 90s. It worked in defeating Bibi in 1998. But the regard with which Israelis hold Obama and the fear they have of the dealing with Iran is such that Bibi won. That's the message. He wasn't speaking out of place in the Congress. He was speaking on behalf of Israelis. And that's what I think Obama is having trouble swallowing.
Yeah, they denied spending taxpayer money against Netanyahu, but obviously there were those charges, A.B. Here's what Charles is referring to with the White House gaggle. The Jerusalem Post writes it this way: after several hours of public quiet, White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest expressed deep concern with Netanyahu's pre-election warning that Arab citizens were being bussed to the polls in droves, risking right-wing power in the Knesset. Rhetoric that seeks to marginalize one segment of their population is deeply concerning. It is divisive, and I can tell you that these are views the administration intends to communicate directly to the Israelis. Earnest said aboard Air Force One, congratulating the people of Israel for holding the poll.
You know, that was for last week. I mean, Netanyahu, who spoke before the Congress 2 weeks ago, this is a different man. He's completely empowered now. He's much stronger. He had a resounding victory. And I'm sure that Mitt Romney and his Republican friends and Bibi Netanyahu were very disappointed in what they saw was a surprise at the polls in 2012 when Obama was reelected. It's time to deal with it. When you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. It's time for him to call him on the phone and move forward. At this point, with what is on Obama's plate, with this person who is stronger, not weaker, with an Iran deal, the results of no Iran deal possibly, and the threat of ISIS, it's a mistake to actually further curdle this relationship.
Here is the minority leader in the House, Nancy Pelosi.
Well, the people of Israel have spoken. I respect the results that they have produced. I think that what they have produced will be a continued lively discussion about the peace process. But our relationship with Israel is a strong one. It will always be. It doesn't depend on personalities.
Steve.
Well, give her credit for holding back tears, which she managed to do when Netanyahu spoke. Look, I mean, the reaction from the White House and Democrats, but particularly from the White House, is of course disappointing. It's not at all surprising. I mean, the comments from Josh Earnest, remember, this is an Obama team that claimed, Vice President Biden claimed that that if Mitt Romney were elected, Republicans or blacks would be back in chains. Republicans wanted to put blacks in chains. So talk about divisive rhetoric. At the time, the Obama campaign dismissed that as faux outrage when the Romney campaign came back to them on that. Look, in terms of the relationship going forward, I don't think much changes. I mean, right now you have the United States, the Obama administration, basically embracing, maybe enabling, a stronger role for Iran in the region. You have the Israelis, I think, correctly understanding that Iran presents them an existential threat and is a broader threat to the region and to the United States. That's not going to change whether there's a nuclear deal or not, although I think the tensions will be exacerbated if this, what certainly sounds like a bad deal, is in fact approved.
Charles, do you buy that, that this was an election about security, that this was an election perhaps even about Iran?
I think that was the overwhelming issue. There were, of course, economic issues, and that's where the left was strongest. But there's no distance between the Labor coalition and Bibi and the Likud coalition on the issue of Iran. They are simply appalled by what the Obama administration is negotiating. And remember, Bibi will now be in power after Obama is retired. And second, as a result of this pettiness, open opposition, where Israelis had to choose between a president in the U.S. whom none of them trust and between a prime minister who, for all of his faults, is defending his country. What they decided is Bibi was the one that they could trust, and that in the ongoing negotiations, the result of all this, Netanyahu, as A.B. said, is stronger, and that means he will have a less recalcitrant war cabinet if he decides he's going to attack Iranian facilities.
And quickly, A.B., the other big issue today that everyone seemed to weigh in on was the two-state solution that Netanyahu had said that it's not going to happen. He said that on election day, actually. Now, the White House, the State Department, we're going to evaluate our approach with regard how best to achieve a two-state solution around him?
That was considered a desperate ploy on Netanyahu's part to get out his vote. It might have been, and it might have worked. But what he's saying is this process is dead. John Kerry tried. That was before Netanyahu was facing re-election. He is stronger now. They're not going to get the same man they were dealing with when this process failed a year ago. So I think it'll be a while before we see him backtracking.
Next up, former Vice President Dick Cheney on President Obama and the race card.